Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Ingersoll, and I'm a writer and novelist from Toledo, Ohio. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about my book called The Lace Makers. In particular, I'd like to talk about Karen's story. So, if you've not read the novel yet, you may want to wait to watch this video because I'm going to be talking a little bit about the character's evolution and the end of the story. Just as um, an aside, I probably am one of the rare people in the United States who hadn't seen Hamilton until 2 weeks ago. And I had the opportunity to watch with a friend of mine. And since that time, I've been able to watch it a couple of times. And I've read the book, and I've watched a lot of videos with Lin Manuel Miranda, who, to be quite honest, I had never heard of until I had seen Hamilton. And it really struck me, the level of quality and dedication and the incredible talent that he brought to telling the story of our nation's history. And of course, he took some creative leave or whatever, and he kind of tweaked the story a little bit to fit the stage. But I really loved the last song, who lives, who dies, who tells their story. And it reminded me a lot of the time that I spent researching the lace makers and researching books of people who told their own story of the Holocaust, who told other people's stories about how they survived, family members or what have you. But the book that I remember the most, that I have the most visceral memory of reading, was by interviews with American soldiers who liberated the camps. It was called The Liberators, America's Witness to the Holocaust by Michael Hirsch. And I'll put the link to that book in the description below. But I remember reading the stories that the American soldiers told Michael and the tears that it brought, even 50 years later. The harrowing stories of them going into the concentration camps once the war was over and liberating the prisoners. What really struck me during the research process, particularly of Karen's story, was trying to find women's stories, because it's logical to know or to think that when these women were carted off in the boxcars, taken to these camps, they weren't emaciated and had gone through the excruciating experiences of the camps yet. So, what happened to them if they were pregnant? What happened to them if they were menstruating? What happened to them when they were separated from their families, their husbands, their loved ones, their children? And so I spent a long time uh, trying to find women's stories. And more recently, you could find autobiographies by women who had survived. But it was really fascinating to look on the internet to find women's stories, and mostly what you found were men. And I think that's one of the reasons why it was important for me to make these characters female. Sapphire, excuse me, Emerald, I changed her name in this new edition, but Emerald and Karen tell their story in a very unique way. And what I want you to know as the reader is that every experience that Karen had in the camps, from chapter 1 until the end, I researched somewhere. Someone experienced it, and worse. I was halfway through the first draft when I contacted our local Jewish community center, and I was really, really honored and blessed to meet an actual survivor of the camps. And I interviewed Clara. Maybe I'd been, 5 or 6 chapters in, and I had an idea in my mind what I wanted Karen to experience. And when I interviewed Clara, when she was in the presence of this other woman who introduced us, she would tell me part of her story. But when that woman was gone, she broke down crying and told me her whole story. And even now, the memory of it brings tears to my eyes. How brutally she was beaten so that she could not have children of her own. How she witnessed the murders of babies and women, and over and over and over again. And she told me that it didn't matter where you came from, what your religion was, what your socioeconomic status was. The Nazis didn't care. They were just property to be done away with when they had stopped serving the SS. And so it's important to know that these stories are true, that these stories are real. If you're interested in learning more about the Holocaust, the Shoah Foundation has an excellent website that you can look through. I'll put that link down below as well. But I encourage you to remember that unless we learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. And while writing The Lacemakers was an experience unlike I had ever had before, Karen's story in particular really allowed me to see the bigger picture of what I thought I knew about World War II. An Emerald's story, what I thought I knew about the Civil War. There's always more to learn. So just like in Hamilton, where we learn more about the revolution and our founding fathers, it's my hope that when you read The Lacemakers, you'll be interested in learning more about these two events in our history. If you are a school teacher or you have a book club, I am happy to sell you copies at a discounted rate for you and your members or your students. And I would be honored to Zoom in if you have a meeting that you'd like me to attend, to listen, to answer questions, to just be a part of your experience. I'd like to close with a note that I received from a good friend of mine who lives in California. I had sent him a copy of The Lacemakers in August, and he wrote me a note last week saying that he gave the book to his girlfriend to read. And she stayed up until the middle of the night reading it, and she called him to tell him how disturbing the story was, how she knew that it had happened to someone. And it really touched her to the point where she had to reach out and contact him. Um, that's a pretty high compliment, although I don't know if compliment is the right word. But it lets me know that this story is really affecting people in a way that moves them deeply. And that's what I hope to be as a writer, as a novelist, is to touch you deeply and to allow you to think about things in a different way, to think about your own life in a different way, and to continue to learn other people's stories and to continue to tell your own story in the best way that you can. So if you'd like to contact me, I'll put all that information below. Please feel free to comment, to share this video, and please subscribe to my channel if you'd like to be notified of any further videos. I'll be talking about Emerald's story next, so you can watch for that video in the next week or so. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.